This is a 1995 Lexus LS400. It cost $1 billion to make. And in terms of the Lexus brand, this is Genesis. This is the car that started it all. Allow me to give you 5 reasons why I think this is a great car and a future classic. After that, I will show you some of my favorite features, take it for a drive, and point out some of the things you should look for if you're planning on buying one. Now, when I say that this is Genesis, I'm referring to the Lexus LS400 nameplate and not this chassis specifically. This one here is the second generation LS400, and even though in many ways you may find it hard to believe, this is an entirely new and improved chassis inside and out. So with that in mind, let's jump right into it. Here are my top 5 reasons why I think this is a great car and a guaranteed future classic. Number 1, let's start with engineering, design, and luxury. Toyota wanted to establish a luxury brand here in the US. So in 1983, Toyota's chairman, Eiji Toyota, issued a challenge to build the world's best car. The project, codenamed F1 or Flagship 1, began and extended 5 years at a cost of over $1 billion, or $2.5 billion in today's money. As you can imagine, failure was not an option. Yukihiko Yaguchi, the man behind many cars like the Crown, all generations of the Toyota Supra, and more recently, the guy you should thank for the ISF and the RCF models, back then he worked on the Toyota Crown. And the goal was to make the quietest car in all of Japan. However, a local reporter quickly pointed out that it wasn't the quietest car in the world. When the LS400 project came up, he finally had his chance to build the quietest car in the world. And quiet it was. But being more quiet than silence itself was not the only goal. This car had very hard to meet requirements. For instance, Toyota's CEO wanted this car to have no noticeable differences at 50,000 miles than that of a brand new LS400. There were also over 400 prototypes made of this car, more than any other car in Toyota's history. You've all seen the commercial with the glasses of champagne sitting on top of the engine while the car accelerates to over 150 miles per hour. That level of engineering, attention to detail, and the relentless pursuit to make something the very best yielded a car that is arguably at an engineering level that is yet to be matched by any other Lexus vehicle to this day, with the exception of the LFA supercar, of course. And who can forget about the design? This car has a timeless design that still looks good today and will continue to look good for many years to come. And listen to this. By the time this car was released in 1989, the project represented the work of 60 designers, 1,400 engineers split into 24 teams, 23 technicians, and over 200 support workers. This alone gives me reason to say that the first generation LS400 is guaranteed to be a great classic in the near future. Now jumping into number 2, performance. This car is the one that changed the game in the luxury segment and took Lexus from a question mark to a benchmark very quickly. The original first generation LS400 had 250 horsepower and 260 foot-pounds of torque. And that came from its 4-liter V8. This second generation model came with the same V8, but with minor changes that increased the output to 260 horsepower at 5,300 RPM and 270 foot-pounds of torque at 4,500 RPM. And that's an output that can take today's WRX from idle, and ask me how I know. Number 3, quality. The Toyota production process quite literally redefined the term quality. Toyota is obsessed with eliminating waste, rework, and unevenness in all areas of the production process. They are well known for Kaizen, which is Japanese for continuous improvement, a set of process and procedures that aims at increasing efficiency and reducing waste. This particular car, as the Lexus flagship vehicle back then, won many awards around the world in segments occupied by world-class luxury cars like the Mercedes-Benz. Number 4, technology and innovation. When the LS400 first reached the market in 1990, it showcased a number of new technologies and features ranging from chassis constructions to even the engine mounts. There are too many to list, but the ones I think most people can understand with ease are the following. Auto leveling high intensity discharge headlights, or HID headlamps. A dash cluster with vacuum fluorescent lights in clear analog form that disappear when the ignition is turned off. And the coolest looking rear windows of any car. And last but not least, durability and reliability. Look, this is a Toyota product. Need I need to say more? No, but I will anyways. As I mentioned before, failure was not an option for Toyota's new luxury brand. Stakes were so high and so much testing and development went into building this car that we currently have models reaching 1 million miles and still driving on the road. Hint, hint, Matt Farah. Right, so now let's jump into some of my favorite features. Then we'll take it for a drive and then point out some of the things you should look for if you're planning on buying one. Now let's start with the cup holders. Starting inside the cabin, we're going to find one of my favorite features, the retracting cup holders. Take a look at how this majestic tray appears out of nowhere and readies itself to hold your drink at the perfect angle and the perfect height in relation to your arm, comfortably resting on the plushy armrest. Now this, my friends, is what you call a magical device. Next, let's look at a device that Lexus very adequately calls under-seat suspension system. And you guessed it, it's under your seat. You may be familiar with this concept, which was developed in the 70s for big trucks. This system is very similar to that, but smaller, and it works great without making you feel like you're sitting on a yoga ball. Even when the suspension bottoms out, the seat takes the hit for you. Amazing. And once you've experienced this on a long trip, let me tell you, this is gonna be like music to your rear. Next, let's look at the dash cluster. Lexus today is renowned for high-tech world firsts, like the climate control system, which uses infrared sensors to monitor facial temperatures of everyone on board. First car to offer a 6-disc CD auto changer, the LS400 was the first car in the world to have satellite navigation fitted as standard in '98. Incredible LCD sports digital dashes, first found in the LFA supercar, and many more. Well, back then, before a time when dash clusters were designed by movie directors, Lexus came up with one of the coolest dash clusters of all time. One with vacuum fluorescent lights in clear analog form that disappear when the ignition is off, just like magic. And last but not least, the rear windows. In the 80s and 90s, when regulations forced automakers to keep a certain amount of the rear window glass exposed in order to protect children in the back seat, automakers started to get creative. The Acura Legend was the first Japanese luxury car to do this, but as usual, I think Lexus did it best by including rails and giving the window a better shape and angle. Pretty cool. Right, so now let's take it for a quick spin. And immediately you can tell that this car is designed for comfort. Everything is, pretty comfortable. The seats don't necessarily hug you, although there's very good lumbar support. This is a car that you can drive for 10 hours straight without getting tired at all, especially because of that suspension system inside the seat itself. And you can tell that a lot of effort was put into the ergonomics of the car, because everything is just designed for comfort. The best way to kind of explain the driving experience of a car like this is probably, think of like a Lincoln Town Car that was sporty. The engine certainly feels capable enough. The car, doesn't feel heavy at all. Now that this is too of a heavy car. This is back in the era where not a whole lot of safety equipment was necessary, or knee airbags, side airbags, all that kind of stuff. So it's a lot lighter than you would think. This car is probably around 3,600 pounds or so. And one aspect that a lot of people don't realize of this car is of how much it provided not just Lexus but Toyota as well, right? The technology, the experience learned from this car actually fueled a better Supra. So obviously, when Lexus was growing, they decided to come up with the SC, which is actually what developed the Mach 4 Supra that we have today. It's not the other way around. The SC didn't come from the Supra came from the SC came from this car. So this is probably, you can call it the grandparent of the Mach 4, by all that technology, all those exercises that Toyota and Lexus went through to be able to produce this level of a car, produce the experience and the knowledge to be able to build the Mach 4 that everybody knows and loves today. The drive, like I was saying, you do have that 90s. When you have the steering wheel at dead center, there's just a little bit of, nothing is happening here. The brakes are pretty good, especially for a car this age. This car was designed to stop from 150, 160 miles an hour, which is very impressive. So it's got very good brakes. And talking about, the driving aspect of it, this was actually the first car to separate the engine computer and the transmission computer, and now have it, two individual units that talk to each other. And that was, I think the main goal of that was to make very smooth shifts. Now we're talking about, a very long time ago. This is late 80s. So the way that they achieved that was to have the transmission talk to the engine to be able to reduce torque for a very fraction of a time, so that the transmission can shift very smoothly, and that yielded a very smooth shift. Now you have, a lot of modern improvements on the automatic transmission, but back then that was key. The turning radius is incredible. It's very, very good. I guess one of the reasons a lot of people like to use this car for drifting. Obviously you can feel the age on this particular car, but still today, very few noises, and the power is pretty good, very smooth. It's quite incredible. And this car, it's 184,000 miles, so pretty. I made a video to show you general things to look for when buying any car, like body shape, signs of wear, leaks, etc. The link is included below. Use that as your basis, but now let's dig into things to look for this car specifically. Keep in mind that it's never a bad idea to bring along a car-savvy friend like myself who is familiar with these cars to help you look for things. If you don't have any friends, I feel bad for you, but also I would recommend that then you get a PPI or a pre-purchase inspection done by an experienced shop or a Lexus dealer. It would be the best $200 you spend on the car. Right, so now let's jump right into it. Let's start with the EGR pipe. There are two of these located at the back of the engine and right against the firewall, making it a major pain in the rear to replace. Be sure to check for exhaust leaks towards the back of the engine, and if you hear some, it could be your EGR pipe. A good way to identify a cracked EGR pipe is by looking for carbon accumulation around the accordion piece of the pipe. To replace these pipes can easily cost you $600 at any shop and twice as much at a Lexus dealer. Next, let's talk about the starter motor. The starter tends to go after 150 to 200,000 miles and is just as bad, if not worse, than the EGR pipe job. To replace it, the entire intake manifold has to be removed. Be sure to ask the owner if the starter has been replaced, and if so, what brand did they use, and if there's a warranty that comes with it. Otherwise, depending on the age and mileage, you might be looking at replacing this item. Next, let's talk about the upper rear control arms. The ball joints on the rear upper control arms go bad after 120,000 miles or so. These can cost about $400 to $800 to replace, including labor. You might as well just buy modified aftermarket parts and start turning this puppy into a drifting machine. Next, the gauge cluster lights. After a couple of decades of use, the LED bulbs inside the dash cluster start to go. There are people out there that can repair them, but you will be without a cluster in the meantime. I don't recommend buying another used one unless you get a really good deal, as you might find yourself with the same issue. Instead, contact Jim Walker, aka the Lexpert. He specializes on repairing LS400's electronics and nothing else. You can find him on his website, LexusInstrumentClusterRepair.com. I haven't used him personally, but heard good things about him. Next, engine mounts. The engine mounts on these cars are hydraulic pneumatic filled motor mounts and are quite difficult to replace. Be sure to check for engine play. The easiest way to do this is by having the owner engage drive while depressing the brake pedal and give it a little bit of gas. If the engine moves too much, then you know the mounts are bad. You can repeat the same steps with the car in reverse to test out motor mounts on the other side. Last but not least, the air suspension. If equipped, be sure to check that the air suspension is working properly. Goes without saying for any vehicle with complex air suspensions, but I had to bring it up. If the air suspension is bad or not operating properly, you have options, including replacing the air suspension with conventional shocks over coils or struts. For more details, go to www.clublexus.com. It is a great resource to have on this and many other Lexus models.
And there you have it. I hope this video has helped you learn more about the Lexus LS400. And if you're in the market for one, hopefully this information can help you choose the right one for you. Make sure to leave your comments below, like, and subscribe for more videos.